Hello and welcome to the Metal Pack Pod, the only podcast dedicated to the metal packaging industry. Today's guest is Rick Hindley. Rick is Executive Director of the Aluminium Packaging Recycling Association. He is responsible for developing and implementing the aluminium industry's strategy to maximising the recycling rate for aluminium packaging in the UK. In 1999, he joined Alcan Aluminium Can Recycling as Operations Manager, and then the following year he became General Manager, and in 2007 he joined Alupro as Executive Director. Rick is Director of the Aluminium Federation and also sits on the UK Government's Advisory Committee on Packaging. I was lucky enough to chat to Rick about the potential impact of a fixed deposit return scheme in the UK, and here is the conversation. I hope you enjoyed, everyone. Hi Rick, thanks for joining me. As customary on the Metal Pack podcast, I've got a quick set of questions for you. So what would you say your favourite Metal Pack product ever is?
Gosh, you said quick. I've got to think hard. I think rather than pick a specific one, I think if you look at drinks cans today, the print quality, I think, is the thing that really sets it off for me. The strides that we've made in the last few years on printing on cans is phenomenal. And so there's some of the designs you see now are just fantastic, which really makes the can stand out on the shelf. So for me, that would be it. Not necessarily a particular pack or a particular product, but actually what you can do with it. So what you can print on it is incredible.
Absolutely, yeah. The digital printing side of things is really innovative in the industry at the moment.
Not my area of specialism, but definitely it jumps off as something that sets the industry apart now.
Fantastic. Your favourite industry personality from times gone by?
Well, I have to say a gentleman called Alex Griffin, who set up Alupro, or what was the Aluminium Can Recycling Association, back in 1989 when I first joined the industry. He was an inspiration to us all. His foresight and what he was doing was incredible. For many of us involved in the aluminium packaging recycling sector today, and particularly Alupro, we remember, well, Alex is still with us, but obviously retired now. But he was a great inspiration to us all, and much of the way we work today was defined by Alex all those years ago. So Alex Griffin.
Excellent. Working arrangements, the old or new normal?
I'm really fed up with sitting in this room so many hours a day. When people ask me about what I enjoyed about my job over the years, it was meeting people, developing relationships and working with people. You can do that to an extent over Zoom, but there's no better way to form a proper relationship and deal with individuals than a face-to-face meeting. So I'm a face-to-face man. I think and my experience over the years shows that's the best way to work and the most effective way to work. So yeah, I think we'll go back to a mixture eventually, hopefully. But for me, old school face-to-face is where it should be.
Absolutely. Those times will come again. Biggest industry challenge looking forward into 2021?
Wow. Well, I think the biggest industry challenge we have, certainly in the UK, which is where I focus, is the reforms that we've got coming up on the packaging or the producer responsibility systems. So we're going to have a deposit return system clearly for beverage cans, and also a reform of the EPR system for the other, as we call it, left behind material. So foil, aerosols, closures, all of those types of metal packaging or aluminium packaging are going to have a new system for driving recycling rates, but most importantly paying for it. And a lot of that will be shaped in 2021 with the consultations coming out supposedly in March, which will define the future of our industry. And I think whether it's deposit return or reform of the EPR system, the packaging sector as a whole is looking at huge additional costs, huge cost burden, and let's just hope it does what it's supposed to do, which is to continue to drive up recycling rates. But clearly from an aluminium point of view, we're ahead of the game anyway and in a very strong position, and what we don't want is these changes to undermine the aluminium can or the aluminium foil container and unravel all the good work we've done over the years.
So, Rick, I think the pertinent topic that I'd like to discuss with you today is DRS, deposit return schemes for our audience. So I think the best thing we can do to start things off, if you can just give a brief bit of background behind what a DRS is and also the issue that's surrounding ourselves in the UK at the moment.
Well, I absolutely agree. Certainly for the beverage can sector, the biggest challenge we have is to ensure that the deposit return systems that come in are shaped to work for us. So just to take a step back, those of you familiar with Nordic recycling systems will be familiar with the deposit return system. Very simply, when you buy your can or your plastic bottle or your glass bottle, you pay an upfront deposit. And then when you take it for recycling, typically through a reverse vending machine, you get that money back. and then the can or the bottle goes into the recycling loop. So on the face of it, a very simple system. But in the Nordics, they've been in place now for 20, 30 years. And I think the challenge that we have in the UK is that we have a well-functioning curbside collection system, which we've developed and in many instances the envy of the world. And we're now looking at counterfeiting a deposit return system on top of that curbside collection system. And probably there's no known country in the world that's ever done that. So that's going to bring with it unique challenges.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose our listeners are probably adept at seeing the likes of the DRS system in Germany. So if you can give perhaps a bit of context of what the Germans did with regards to DRS and also the differences involved there with the UK DRS scheme that's being proposed.
Good question. My first answer would be, let's not follow the German example. I think what we're constantly telling the UK government is that you can't just take one model and lift it and expect it to work seamlessly in the UK, because the UK market is unique. But if you look at what happened in Germany in early 2000s, the deposit system came in on top of an existing collection system, which was functioning pretty well. But the industry, for various reasons, fought against it for a long time because they felt that it wasn't required. And they also felt that it might distort the market. Now, to cut a long story short, the deposit was bought in very quickly. And there were issues in the way that it was bought in, where effectively it wasn't a level playing field. And retailers made the choice to simplify the system for themselves, and so ultimately delisted almost cans from their pack mix. And so almost overnight in Germany, in about 2003, I think it was, the beverage can disappeared from the shelves in German supermarkets, which was catastrophic for our industry, led to plant closures and job losses. And it's only just starting to recover now. And simply down to a poorly designed system where consumers were expected to bring back their packaging to the point, to the place that they bought it from, and an overcomplicated system. And the retailers reacted to make it simpler by effectively saying, well, if we get rid of the can format, it'll make it easier for us. So what it did was push more product into bottles, glass bottles, and into plastic bottles.
Do you think that the UK are potentially making that same mistake? I mean, looking at some of the statistics on your website, you think that there could potentially be a 60% increase on a 24 pack of 330ml cans as opposed to 13% on 4 litre plastic bottles. So do you think that is potentially, I mean, there's some ridiculous statistics there if you actually break it down. Do you think there is a real danger that we are making the same mistakes that the Germans did?
So yes, totally. I think we have a great opportunity here to develop a world-class deposit return system in the UK, but a deposit return system which takes into account a huge number of different factors to ensure that we don't get any unintended consequences. And if the rest of the UK, so England, Wales and Northern Ireland, follow the lead that's been taken by Scotland, where they've implemented a 20 pence deposit on every container, no matter what the size is, but we're very concerned that we face a catastrophic impact on the multi-pack can, effectively making it not competitive against its alternative, which is 1.5 or 2 litre plastic bottles. And you're quite right. As we know, most consumers are price savvy. So when they go to a supermarket, they go to a supermarket with a fixed budget and they're confronted with a shelf where they would have in the past bought perhaps 24 cans of cola in a multi-pack. And next to it, there's 4 2-litre plastic bottles, and they see that the deposit on the multi-pack is £4.80 effectively, and the deposit on the same volume of drink in plastic bottles is only 80 pence. We're really concerned that it will shift consumers towards the large plastic bottles. So in Scotland, we did some consumer research, and it showed that 60% of consumers said that they would actually shift from multi-pack cans into plastic. So that would be catastrophic. And so to understand this better, we commissioned some research by London Economics, an independent think tank. And it's the first study of its kind to look in detail at the impact of flat and variable deposits, so deposits that vary according to the volume of container. And they concluded that there could be an impact of something between, depending the way you look at it and the way you model it, between a loss of 2.5 and 4.7 billion cans to the UK market. Wow. Moving over to plastic. So it's massive. And that could be a hit of between 117 million to 211 million pounds to our industry, the aluminium can industry in the UK. So if we don't get this right, yes, we could be following Germany in implementing a badly designed system, which is going to have the unintended consequence of moving people towards plastic rather than cans, which, as a can person interested in talking about infinitely recyclable aluminium cans, that's clearly an issue and something that our industry should be absolutely worried about. And hence we're fighting on their behalf to try and influence the government to implement a deposit which varies according to the size of the container, which is typical in the Nordic countries.
You make a compelling case. So why the indifference from government so far? It seems like the evidence, or maybe we're, and certainly myself, I'm on the inside looking out, and that you're obviously preaching to the converted. I mean, if you take a step back, governments in the UK, why aren't they implementing this?
It's interesting. So Scotland has made the decision to go for 20 pence, as we say, despite our lobbying 18 months or so ago against that. And what we realised, looking back, is that we didn't have the evidence to really demonstrate the impact that this could have. So it was us saying that we thought it was going to have this. We've done a bit of consumer research and we have this fear. And so whilst the Scottish Government's Environment Committee were very sympathetic and actually supported our concerns, the Scottish Government chose to go with a flat deposit. So that's why we went ahead and commissioned this research to really look at this in detail. Now, we've shared this with DEFRA and the UK government, and they are very concerned and interested as well. They said to us that we want to see the evidence. This was before we did the report. Nobody has presented any evidence. So we've now done what they've asked us to do. We commissioned an independent report which clearly shows there is an issue here. So we hope that the government will now listen. We understand in the consultation that's coming out in March that there is now a section that talks about fixed and variable rate deposits. The pushback that we get, not just from government but from others, is that a variable rate is too complex. A consumer in the UK wouldn't get it. And I don't buy that. If you look at not all of it, the Nordic countries, Norway, Sweden, Finland, Denmark, they all have variable rate deposits and have had them for 15, 20 years. Is the UK consumer really any different to the Nordic? And so we're just about to do some more consumer research to really test this. But to me, consumers have been used to paying more for larger containers. Why is it any different about the deposit? I just think it's just an easy excuse. So we're the next part of our work is to demonstrate that it really isn't an issue and consumers get it and consumers would welcome it. Now, interestingly, we held a round table which was hosted by Mark Pawsey MP in Westminster 2 weeks ago. We had parliamentarians attending. We had, I think you were there, Alex, and we had NGOs and others. And after that meeting, we've had lots of interest, people wanting to know more, wanting to talk more about it. So it's definitely got this issue on the agenda of some pretty influential stakeholders who will also be impacted by it because they're at different parts of the supply chain. So it's done what we wanted it to, which is to get people talking about it in advance of the consultation. So clearly it needs us to be able to generate support from other parties. We're talking to NGOs who are also becoming quite sympathetic about it. We're talking to brewers, we're talking to retailers, and actually there's quite a lot of interest in this now. So let's hope.
So what happens next? What's the consultation process? And if you can just explain to us the next few months and...
Timings are a little bit up in the air. Obviously, the whole thing has been delayed by COVID anyway. Scotland is committed to going ahead with its deposit return scheme launching in July 2022, which again is pretty ambitious, I think. The UK government, so for England, Wales and Northern Ireland, is due to go to consultation, we understand, early March. Originally, the implementation in the UK was planned for 2023, but we understand that is now being pushed back a little bit because of COVID and other issues, and to make sure they get a scheme that's designed, that's fit for purpose. So I think realistically, we're looking at probably late 2024, 25 before a deposit return system comes in. So the consultation will come out. It's a 12-week consultation, which will take us into June. The government will then go away and obviously digest it, come back with their take out from the consultation, and then I assume go ahead with the design of the system, because the Environment Bill gives the underpinning legislation to allow it to happen, although that's again been stalled as well. But I am assured that will go through in time to underpin the DRS. So during that time, we continue with our program to heighten awareness to the issue and the potential significant implications to the industry. Now, interestingly, it's not all negative. So what the report also shows is that a variable rate DRS, which actually deliver collection rates, high collection rates quicker than a flat rate DRS. So typically collection levels for a good DRS plateau out at about 90% after about 3 years. Well, this report shows that you'll actually hit that rate probably towards the end of year 1. So from that point of view, very positive, but also a variable rate is cheaper for producers. So for those who've got to pay for the scheme ultimately, which will ultimately be the brands, it will be cheaper to have a variable deposit. So there are some really compelling findings from the study. So we hope that it will interest others for many different reasons. Depending on what sector you're in, the takeout that should make you think, actually, there's a good point here. This could have an impact on us, or this, we should look at this in a different way. So we're just hoping that others will support us and call on government not to leave it to the scheme administrator, which is their plan at the moment, to determine whether the deposit is fixed or variable, but actually to build it into the regulations. So the regulations say that the deposit will vary according to size of the container. So that's our big ask of government, to make it very clear in the regulations that this is the way it will happen.
Obviously, with it's a unique situation that we've been in for the last year or so, and with the prospect of, I know vaccines are being rolled out at pace in the UK, but potentially the COVID-19 pandemic will still be here in a year, 18 months' time. It's not going away anytime soon, and that's taking a lot of government's attention, certainly in the next few months. Is that a big concern, that this is just, to coin a phrase, pardon the pun, just to kick the can down the road for another few months?
It could be. I think, yes, there's a lot of distractions for government at the moment. I also think that there are all of the government departments that need to be involved in this aren't actually engaged in this at the moment. I mean, this system is going to bring huge additional costs to industry, to producers, both large and small, because they'll all have a share of the burden, as is the reform of the producer responsibility system in the UK as well, where effectively costs of collection of packaging that's not in a DRS will be shifted from local authorities to producers. So just on that alone, we're talking about an additional cost burden to industry of about £1.3 billion. And that's going to come in at a time when big sections of our industry are really, really struggling, and could be enough to push businesses over the edge. And from our discussions with other government departments, and the Department of Business, for example, it's not on their radar at all. So yes, it's very much that the government is focused on the environment, quite rightly. But equally, there are other parts of government which have got other priorities who are not engaged in this discussion at all, and not aware of the ramifications for industry. So the huge additional cost burden, which is likely to, which will come on industry as hopefully we are coming out of COVID. And ultimately, a lot of those costs will be pushed onto consumers as well at a time when they are also cash strapped. So yes, it's potentially, some would argue, positive for the environment, all of these changes, but we're not convinced it's all been properly thought through in joined up government.
That's interesting what you said, and also the statistics earlier with regards to consumers being very price driven. Is that a concern with the economy tanking, and that even those with sustainably sort of goodwilled and lovers of the environment, if they haven't got any money in their pocket, they're just going to choose the cheap option? Is that a real concern for you as an organisation? For
sure. Going back to absolutely the discussion that we had earlier, that you see £4.80 on the shelf compared to 80p. I know where my money goes as to where the price strap shopper will go, even though they get that money back if they bring it back for recycling, which is clearly the intention. It's what you actually have to put out at the till in the first place that's the real issue. Certainly all the consumer research that we've done over the last few months for this report would justify that. So what the consumer research, for currently 78% of the people we spoke to said that they buy multi-packs because they're better value for money. And 50% of those we spoke to said that price is the most important consideration for consumers. So you shift it. So actually the price advantage, if you put in the deposit, goes on the plastic bottle. You can see those consumers moving from looking at that 24 pack of cans and actually thinking, yeah, I like that pack, but actually my wallet is more important to me, so I'm going to buy those 4 plastic bottles. And of course, there's other consequences from that as well. The government at the moment is supposed to be focused on reducing the amount of plastic we use. You've got the plastic tax coming in, but they also have other strategies as well, which could be impacted by this. Now, interestingly, I read somewhere the other day, and it's a stat that was on the public stat, I think some brands have seen a 20% increase in the last 12 months in their sales of multi-pack cans. So they're a very popular format, particularly for use at home.
No, absolutely. And we're seeing a 6% growth year on year for the industry, and beverage cans being an integral part of that. So
yeah, it's interestingly, the other parts of that is we were talking earlier about what goes on in other markets, and the Nordic markets, multi-pack, where DRS is well established and high performing, their preponderance of multi-packs is much, much smaller. So typically you'd buy beer or soft drinks in single cans, whereas in the UK, the latest Nielsen data for last year, 2019, shows us that 96% of beer cans are sold in multi-packs. 96% of cider and just under 60% of soft drinks are in multi-pack. So that just shows you how important the multi-pack can sector is for our industry. So if that's under threat, it sounds very dramatic, but I'd say the industry is under threat. And we need to wake up to this, and it just won't have an impact on the aluminium industry and the can makers. But I'm quite sure that retailers should be listening to this, because the multi-pack can is very important to them in terms of their shelf space and their profit margins ultimately.
Yeah, I was interested to read in your press release recently about plant closures if DRS isn't adapted. I mean, that is a statement. Is that one that's just more of a firing shot to warn the industry to get its act together, or is that really a serious statement that people need to take note of? I
don't think it's a firing shot at industry. I think it's more at government to say, look, this has got potentially a massive impact on industry in the UK in terms of generating revenue and ultimately taxes, but equally jobs. And perhaps it is a bit of a scare story, but if we were in worst case scenario, we lost 4.7 billion cans out of what's nearly a 10 billion market now. That's really significant. That's half the market gone. So you'd have to assume that plants would close because there wouldn't be the demand for the cans. So those figures came out of the London Economics Report. So it's not us trying to create some sort of over-egg the story. It's come out of a genuinely independent report. And yes, there's a scale there between losing 2.5 to 4.7 billion cans. But even if it was 2.5 billion cans, that's a lot of cans and it's a lot of aluminium. And I think undoubtedly businesses would be saying, well, if the can market has contracted that much in the UK, do we still need so many can plants? So potentially they could be at risk.
It's true. And one final question on this is that we do very much focus on metal for obvious reasons because we're in this industry. But do you think there is going to come a time, and the plastics industry, PET, etc., are very aggressive in their marketing strategy? I mean, we're seeing that they are getting their house in order with regards to recyclability and that marketing message. Do you see that the narrative is changing? And I mean, I see talk of carbon footprint being such a huge issue. And is that an issue that the industry really needs to bear in mind as we look forward into this year? I
think what we have with the aluminium can is a fairly unique product. Apart from glass and obviously steel as well, but in comparison with with plastic, aluminium is infinitely recyclable, whereas a plastic bottle can only be recycled sort of a handful of times. I've heard sort of 5 or 6 times. But literally, if a can comes back in a system, it can be recycled, as we know. So we have a big advantage there. And the more of that, the cans that we get back, the better impact it has on our carbon footprint. So people make judgments about carbon footprints comparing different materials. And as we all know with these studies, you can make them basically say whatever you want. And I think the important thing for our industry is that demand for recycled aluminium gets stronger and stronger every year. So there's a guaranteed market for it. It's high value material, so it doesn't need an artificial subsidy to fund the recycling systems. And yes, the price of scrap does fluctuate with the LME, but at a very high level. Whereas with plastic, it's so dependent on oil prices, and you get to the point where actually there's no stimulus to recycle plastic because the price of oil is so low that it doesn't actually stack up to recycle it. So I think from our point of view, the plastics industry needs to get their story together. They need to invest. But I think we're in a very strong position because it makes good commercial sense for us to use recycled materials. So that drives the recycling performance. And I also think that we should, and we don't shout enough about it as an industry. I've been involved in this industry for far too long, but we have invested heavily in our recycling systems, not just in the UK, but in Europe, because we want the material back. And I have to say, you cannot say the same for the plastic sector, who are now reacting because of consumer and government pressure. They wouldn't be in the same place now if they'd taken the same brave investment decisions that the aluminium industry has done. And that's driven by the fact aluminium is truly recyclable, has a high value, and is a valued and a second, we've always called it a secondary raw material, because that's absolutely what it is. So aluminium will stand by its own credentials, and people can make their own comparisons. But I think when it comes push to shove, infinitely recyclable compared to a material that's only recycled a handful of times. People will make their own judgments.
Yeah, and it looks like the that strategy and that message is paying dividends. Looking at the recent recycling statistics during lockdown, it seems that consumers are really starting to get that message. Yeah,
so absolutely. So none of us knew what was going to happen in 2020 when we went into lockdown, and we were all thinking, well, what's going to happen? And we'd all got our eyes on the Olympics and other things going on in the year, which was going to be good for can sales. And I know all those went, and all the outdoor events and things all went. So effectively, can sales outside the home disappeared. So the hospitality sector disappeared. But look what's happened. Massive jump in the consumption of cans at home. So people locked down at home. Multi-pack cans, very, very important to them, both in terms of soft drinks and beer. So they're drinking beer out of a multi-pack rather than in the pub. But equally, from our point of view, and our organisation is very much focused on recycling, we've seen a massive jump in the recycling levels in the UK. Just yesterday or today, the 2020 final recycling numbers were published for aluminium, and we've seen a 32% uplift in the volume of aluminium cans and foil trays and others that are collected. And it's because people are at home. It's easy to recycle at home. Where we've lost cans in the past is on the go, where there just aren't enough collection bins and there's a few cans here and there. So what this shows is that when people are at home, they've got into good behaviours. Let's just hope that continues. But so for 2020, we're going to be looking at record high recycling rates, can recycling rates. My personal prediction is that when we calculate the numbers, they'll be well over 80%. Which is a fantastic achievement and shows what can be achieved. And it's also interesting to see that aluminium cans or aluminium packaging has seen the biggest jump of all other materials. So that tells you something, doesn't it? Yeah.
And just to round things off, I mean, post-pandemic, we say that the recycling rates are very good because people are at home. Do you think people will just get into old habits of on the go, and we need to almost make it as idiot-proof as possible? I mean, I've seen Every Can Counts are very strong on this at the moment to make it easy for consumers to have that option of recycling products when they're out and about. Do we need to get better?
Absolutely. That's our Achilles heel, as it is with all materials at the moment, is the recycling of packaging that's consumed outside the home. But again, I think that's where the aluminium industry and the can industry leads the way, because again, we've invested. So we developed the Every Can Counts program here in the UK 12 years or so ago. And that was all about encouraging people to recycle cans outside the home. Now, thanks to the funding largely from the aluminium industry and the can makers, it's now expanded into around 17 countries across Europe. It is the only system or scheme of its kind where industry has really come together and invested to make a difference. It can't provide the total solution, but what it does show us is what works and what doesn't work. And so that's why the job is now to be done, is to work with governments, work with municipalities to find the funding to effectively put in place a decent on-the-go recycling system to actually get those cans back. Although it's a different environment, what this has shown us through lockdown, when it is convenient, people do recycle. So we need to make sure, and we need to do something to make sure it's convenient for people to recycle when they're out and about. And then we will see these recycling levels. And I have to say, we're really proud of what's been achieved for the aluminium can specifically in the UK. And it is the most recycled drinks pack, and certainly will be this year. So lots of good things to talk about, but absolutely one of our biggest challenges to crack this recycling outside the home.
Rick, it's been a pleasure. Thanks very much for your time.
Well, thank you, Alex. It's a great pleasure. And we look forward to taking on the challenges of 2021 and beyond. And hopefully we'll be talking to you about the successful introduction of a deposit return system in the UK in a few years' time, which hasn't disadvantaged our industry.
Look forward to it. Thanks very much. Well, that was a pleasure having Rick as a guest on the Metal Pack pod. With Rick at the helm of Alupro, the industry is in safe hands, that's for sure. I thought he made a compelling case for the need for a variable DRS scheme, and the future health of the aluminium industry really depends on it. We wish Alupro well, and at the Metal Packager, we'll continue to promote the importance of the issue. We hope you will too. Our next episode features Michael Mapes, CEO of Trivium, so that should be an absolute cracker. Please do like the podcast, everybody, and give us a rating. You take care now. All the best.